You think you know the Dutch. Tall figures on bicycles. A country balanced below sea level. Wooden shoes. Windmills. Order. But what if the real Dutch story doesn't begin in calm lowlands at all? What if it begins inside collapse? Inside violence? Inside the slow biological aftermath of the Roman Empire tearing itself apart? And what if the same people who engineered land out of the ocean were also among the very first Europeans to reach the far edges of the world, Australia, New Zealand, the Pacific? The truth is far stranger than the stereotype, and far more deeply written into human DNA. Because the story of the Dutch is not just history. It is biological memory, encoded in bloodlines, bones, and inherited survival instincts. This is not a story about tulips. This is a story about endurance, conquest, and ancient genetic lineages that refuse to disappear. To understand the Dutch, we need to start with their environment. Because environments don't just shape culture, they shape bodies and behavior. The Netherlands is not simply a country. It is a negotiation with the sea. Nearly 1/3 of the land sits below sea level. Without constant engineering, dikes, pumps, dams, this nation would vanish beneath saltwater. That kind of pressure doesn't create relaxed societies. It creates precision, coordination, control. For over 1,000 years, survival here meant mastering water or dying. And that obsession with engineering didn't stop at land. It extended outward into rivers, coasts, and eventually oceans. But this relationship with flooding is far older than the modern Dutch state. Thousands of years ago, early inhabitants built artificial dwelling mounds just to stay alive above rising water. Which raises the real question. Who were the people who looked at a flooded marsh and decided, this is worth fighting for? To answer that, we need to travel back more than 2,000 years. Before nations, before borders, before the Netherlands existed at all. Northern Europe was once dominated by Germanic tribes. Not a single people, but dozens of groups bound by shared language roots, customs, and genetic ancestry. Among them were the Franks, Saxons, Frisians, and Batavians, the direct biological ancestors of the modern Dutch. They lived along the Rhine Delta for centuries. And when Rome attempted to push north, it failed catastrophically. In 9 AD, Germanic warriors annihilated 3 Roman legions in the Teutoburg forest. It was a trauma that scarred Rome's military psyche. Rome stopped advancing. The Rhine became the border. But history didn't stop there. As the Western Roman Empire collapsed, those same tribal populations surged outward. They didn't just survive Rome. They replaced it. Frankish kingdoms spread across Europe. Under Charlemagne, their empire dominated the continent. This matters because it tells us something critical. The Dutch did not descend from passive farmers. They descend from warriors, organizers, and state builders. You can still hear this ancestry today. Dutch is a Germanic language, closely related to English and German. Shared words aren't accidents. They're linguistic fossils. Each one is evidence of a common ancestral tongue, Proto-Germanic, spoken thousands of years ago by people whose descendants still walk the same land. But language is only part of the story, because Dutch influence didn't stay in Europe. It traveled. Flemish in Belgium, Afrikaans in South Africa, Dutch words embedded in Indonesia, the Caribbean, and beyond. This spread wasn't cultural curiosity, it was empire. At its peak, the Dutch Empire rivaled Britain's. The Dutch East India Company became the most valuable corporation in human history. They controlled Indonesia for centuries. They held colonies in South America, Africa, India, and Asia. They founded New Amsterdam, modern New York. And long before British ships arrived, Dutch explorers mapped Australia and reached New Zealand. This part of history is uncomfortable, because it involves violence, exploitation, and slavery. But it is part of the origin story. And origins don't care about comfort. Now we go deeper than documents, deeper than language. We go into DNA. Modern genetic studies allow us to map Dutch ancestry with extraordinary precision. When scientists analyzed Y chromosomes across the Netherlands, they discovered something unexpected. Despite the country's small size, Dutch genetics show clear geographic structure. Most Dutch men carry paternal lineages belonging to haplogroups I and R. Ancient genetic signatures linked to European hunter-gatherers and Bronze Age steppe migrations. Some lineages cluster north to south, others east to west. These patterns reflect settlement continuity spanning more than 1,500 years. But when researchers examined mitochondrial DNA passed through mothers, the structure vanished. No regional clustering, which tells us something profound about Dutch society. For centuries, men stayed rooted to their land. Women moved between communities. A deeply patrilocal system. Stable male lineages. Localized inheritance. Ancient DNA confirms it. Unlike many parts of Europe, the Low Countries experienced remarkable genetic continuity after Rome fell. Meaning this is not abstract ancestry. Some modern Dutch families carry Y chromosomes that trace directly back to men who lived on the same soil over 1,000 years ago. And even deeper than that, the dominant Dutch haplogroups carry markers linked to Bronze Age steppe herders from the Pontic, Caspian region. People who migrated into Europe with horses, wagons, and new social structures nearly 5,000 years ago. Their biological imprint never left. And now genetics is doing something radical. It's rewriting old assumptions. Some evidence suggests settlement patterns flowed from north to south, not the other way around. History isn't being confirmed. It's being corrected. And this brings us to a final perspective shift. Human populations have always moved farther than we imagine. Austronesian peoples crossed oceans from Taiwan to Hawaii, New Zealand, and Madagascar thousands of years ago, long before European navigation. Their genetic and linguistic connections still exist today, which proves something essential. No people are isolated. No origin story is simple. No culture is pure. The Dutch are not an exception. They are the product of ancient migrations, environmental pressure, biological inheritance, and historical choices. Some brilliant, some brutal. They are engineers because survival demanded it. Explorers because confinement was impossible. Empire builders because systems scaled. The truth is not neat, but it is real. And it's far more interesting than myths. So when you see someone riding a bike through Amsterdam, remember, you're looking at the living outcome of ancient bloodlines, environmental warfare, global expansion, and genetic memory. History didn't disappear. It became human. What part of the story surprised you the most? Let me know in the comments. And if you want more origin stories that biology and history were never meant to keep separate, subscribe, because the past isn't quiet. It's still inside us.